Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at the Zero Tolerance 0920. This is a Les George design based on his Harpy custom. And I've got to tell you guys that the Les George Zero Tolerance sort of partnership here that's been going on is really a match made in heaven. Some amazing knives, not the least of which is this one, which I'm going to say is Zero Tolerance's best model this year and perhaps one of their better models overall. I would put this on a very short list with like the 562, the 560, maybe the 452. I know I need to do a top 5 ZT knives, and I will get to that. And some of you, we've even discussed it on the Facebook page, which if you're not over there, I'll put a link in the description box. But on the Sharp Stuff Facebook page, I'll often ask questions like, hey, what are your top 5 ZTs? Something like that when I'm working on a video like that. Anyway, back to the knife at hand. I do want to, again, thank Real Bush Monkey EDC for sending this along. It is a great, great knife. And man, you know, the knives he sent have been awesome. He has great taste in knives, and so I really appreciated being able to have a bunch of your knives visiting, Scott, and it's been a real joy to kind of get to use and familiarize myself with them. The problem is, man, I want to buy some of these so bad. Okay, so maybe you should be getting a commission from Zero Tolerance because of the purchases that I'm going to have to be forced to make after I send these knives back to you. Anyway, let's get down to all of the specs here. This knife is 8 and 15/16, so darn close to 9 inches. It's not even funny. In fact, it's even a little more than 15/16. 3 and 7/8 on the blade. Okay, so this blade length just under, and I mean just under 4 inches. Okay, and the handle is just over 5 inches. So that's basically what we're getting, our 9-inch total. And this is literally 1/16 more, so 5 and 1/16. Now, for a knife this big, you would expect a pretty high number in terms of weight, but this guy is only 5.4 ounces. Now, you know, just over 5 ounces is really, really good, guys. I know you kind of look at that and go, man, 5 ounces is pretty heavy. You know, my Para 2 is less than 4 ounces. Well, consider how much more material is here. Consider how much more cutting edge. The blade alone could almost weigh as much as a Para 2. Okay, so 5.4 ounces is really, really good. And I've got to tell you guys, in pocket, this is really, really nice. It's quite slim in this dimension, so that really makes this a lot more comfortable. And the only thing about carrying this knife is it is a fairly wide knife, but my front right pocket is reserved just for my knife, and so that doesn't bother me at all to have a knife that's a little wider. And a lot of the knives I carry, you know, the Manix, even the Para 2, lots of knives are a little thicker, and so I'm not going to complain about that at all. As I say, the only thing in that front pocket is my knife, so it's no big deal. By the way, if you're someone who carries a bunch of stuff in that front pocket and is always trying to figure out how to get it in there, yeah, you may have to lean toward leaner knives, but that's a trade-off I'm not willing to make. Carry, size, weight. Oh, wait. Before we leave that, I should point this out. Check out the milling inside of there, which is why they're able to get this knife down to 5.4 ounces. There we go. Now we can move on with life and talk about the blade, which again is great. This blade is 20 CV. You've got a really high flat grind. It's not a full flat grind, obviously. High flat grind, stone wash, really nice clip point there with a recurve. It's nice and thin behind the edge. And ZT, these knives, the Les George knives, have tended to get this really, really right. Again, it's nice and thin behind the edge, so this knife slices exceptionally well. And I feel like I've said that over and over again, but I want to point it out because for a heavy-duty knife that's meant to be, you know, sort of hard use, often what's the sacrifice they make is a blade that's so thick down here that it doesn't cut anything worthwhile. So again, they've gotten this really, really right. This slices like crazy, and 20 CV is amazing steel. I really like 20 CV steel. I've got it in a few other knives. And by the way, I think I called this knife S35VN on the steel in my first impressions video, which was a big mistake, so I apologize for that, and I'm correcting it now. It is 20 CV steel, which is awesome, awesome steel. Almost worth buying the knife just to get that blade steel. And the blade, again, is amazing. It performs so well. And that is even with the recurve. Now, some of you guys don't like recurves because they're hard to sharpen. I would say, to me, honestly, it doesn't make any difference because I mostly use a sharp maker anyway. And on a sharp maker, a recurve it makes no difference. If you really have a hard time with it, get one of those rod sharpening systems. The Lansky rods are like dirt cheap, like 17 bucks or something, and you should be good to go with that. Okay, so blade again is a total win. I absolutely love this blade. Now I tend to kind of like recurves a little bit. Stylistically, and that would be a different story. If you don't like a recurve for style reasons, you just don't think they look cool, sort of like the way I don't like stonewash finishes, okay? I'm not a big fan of stonewash finishes, and this does have one. I would like to see, what I'd really like to see is stonewash on the flats and satin here. I think that would be just amazing, okay? As it stands, it's still really stinking good. So that's the blade, great steel, great cutting edge. I mean, it's long, it's got a nice fine point for detailed tasks. It's got that recurve, which just captures material. And so the blade on this guy is an absolute win. And really most things are, guys. I'm really hard pressed to tell you something I dislike, especially strongly dislike about this knife. Size and weight, a win. Blade, total win. Let's talk about the action. This is, of course, or lockup and deployment, really. So this is a titanium frame lock. You've got your stainless steel lock bar insert here with an over travel stop, ball bearing pivot, and it is a flipper only knife. Okay, now ZT has a tendency to get their detents a little strong, but not so with this one. This is a really well balanced zero tolerance. And so if you've had other ZTs and you're like, I don't know, I'm gonna stay away from them because they're just too stiff, this one is not bad. Now it's extremely smooth. Now, there we go. It's extremely smooth, as you can see, just drops shut. The odd time, the one complaint I will make about this is, I don't know, say 1 in 5 times, the blade, let's see if I can do it. The blade will catch on, there we go. So right now the blade is caught against the detent ball, and that will happen from time to time. It's not something that happens every time I deploy the knife, but it's a little bit of an annoyance when it does happen, which happens, as I say, about 1 in 5 flips. Otherwise though, the action is great. You got a bearing pivot that's very smooth, really solid in every direction, and just, and then I guess the other point that I should make, and I've been trying to make more recently, is that the actuation of everything. So is it comfortable? Is it workable? And the answer is absolutely yes. The lockup, the lock bar tension is just nice. You can see the relief cut right there. And the relief cut here is a little thinner than I'd like to see it. So I guess we'll complain about that as well. I would like to see this a little bit thicker, but I guess the trade-off you get is that it's nice and easy to actuate. So in terms of lockup and deployment, once again, I really don't have much to complain about. I would like to see the relief cut a little bit thicker, and the odd time you will catch the blade on the detent ball, but that's not a frequent issue. I'd say 80% of the time the knife closes just fine, and when it does, it is so smooth. And guys, let me stop here for 1 second and point out that action is one of the things that I love about ZTs. You're getting great, just smooth, reliable actions on most ZTs comparable to much more expensive knives. And I've got to say, I really like that. So, in case you haven't figured it out by now, action, lockup, and deployment, once again, is a total win. Absolutely well done. Finally, let's talk about what's probably my favorite thing about this knife, if the blade isn't my favorite thing, and that is the handle. The handle on this is milled, 3D machined titanium handles with these nice, essentially they've left the milling lines in, okay? So I'm sure that's kind of what's going on here, but that gives it just enough texture, okay? Very open construction. You can see the pillar standoffs back there, nicely milled internally. And so in terms of construction and how they've put this thing together, again, a total win, guys. I guess maybe looks like they've probably screwed these screws right into titanium, which is not something I love, but is also not something that I just throw the knife away and forget about it. And since we're talking about the clip for a second, the clip is attractive, and most importantly, it's just simple and functional. So it's just a plain spring clip. It is reversible, and that is about the only thing on the show side that does detract a little bit, but not that much. Like, look at that knife. Still an extremely attractive knife, even with those 3 holes, and especially if you know they're there, so you can remove that, you can flip the clip over. Well, then most people are going to be like, okay, they kind of got to be there. When you do look at the clip, though, it's quite nice. I like the color scheme on here, and let me show you this. The clip and the spacers are close enough to matching. They may not be exact, but they're close enough that it's hard to notice if they're not. I'm gonna say they're matching. Okay, maybe someone with a more discerning eye is gonna say, oh, they're a little off, but they seem to look fine to me. And then of course you've got this nice big pivot screw on this side. It is a captured pivot, so this kind of slides in a certain way and locks into place when we're thinking about construction and how this thing is put together. And so again, no complaints about how this knife is built. And finally, the ergonomics are awesome. The clip totally disappears. There are no hot spots. The 3D milling just makes it fit your hand perfectly. The 2 complaints that I do have about this are, number 1, the jimping on the back of the spine here is soft. You can see my finger, I can slide my thumb back and forth on that. It doesn't even think about catching, okay? Now it's still fine because when I grip this knife, I've got that nice deep choil at the front, so I'm not worried at all about sliding up or having issues that way. The one other thing I would say though is this distance right here, okay, between the bottom of the blade and the front of my finger, I'm a person that likes to have that distance to be as small as possible. So let's see if I can give you an example. I think every knife I have here, well, maybe. Even this one's a little better. So here is a Wee Knife 604, and you can see this distance is still, it's narrower than my finger. It's not ideal, but it's not bad either. This knife, as well as the other Les George knives, they just seem to put my finger a little bit further back from the cutting edge than I would prefer. Again, it's not a deal breaker for me. I still, the ergonomics are still fantastic. And honestly, I find myself doing this with most of my knives, so I like a thicker blade. I'll often, if I'm doing a really fine task, come up here and hold the blade and cut with that tip or something like that. And if I'm doing longer tasks, maybe I'm cutting fruit or whittling wood or something, then I'll hold the knife in this configuration, okay, with a saber grip. So not terrible, but not my preference. I like to be as close to the blade as possible. So now that we've gotten through everything, I love the size and weight, I love the blade, I love the action, I love the handle. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm a huge fan of this knife, and it's definitely going on my top 5 or top 10 knives of the year. Let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. What do I got? First off, let's bring in the other Les George that is visiting from Real Bush Monkey. This is the Zero Tolerance 0909, another great offering from Les George. And if you're really loving this design, but you're like, man, that is just too steep for me, this might be a knife to consider, especially now because they're on sale in a lot of places. Let's go ahead and throw in a pair of 2, just because everyone's sort of familiar with that. And then from here out, oh no, I'm going to break the rule one more time. If all you're looking for is a large, sort of tactical style, heavy duty knife, can't go wrong with the Recon 1. I always feel like when I'm reviewing a knife like this, I feel like I have to bring in a Recon 1, just because, one, some of you viewers are like, Kevin, this is way out of my reach, and I really like a knife this style, but I just can't afford it. The Recon 1 is a great option for less than half the price, and every bit as tough and every bit as functional, perhaps even more so. Now, yeah, the Zero Tolerance is going to satisfy some higher end customers, right? Someone who's buying this is not just buying it to be a large heavy duty knife. They want something that's attractive, that's interesting, that's designed by a well-known designer, that's got high-end materials and great steel. Okay, so I get it. Let's bring in a couple more. Here's a knife, and now we're going the opposite direction. This is a Riot knife. This is the Torrent. It's probably my favorite Riot to date. I absolutely love this knife. It is really everything about it is just what I want it to be and just what I love in a knife. It's a little heavier, very similar though, right? We've got high-end good steel, M390 steel, which is equivalent to 20 CV. Nicely designed titanium frame lock here. A little more refined and a little nicer in the action. And of course, you're going to be paying more money for this. This is going to be, I think you can pick these up for around 300, maybe 325 on the secondary market these days. But brand new, it's probably going to cost you 350 or something like that. Maybe not. Maybe you can get them a little cheaper, and I hope that's true. Let me bring in another knife, and you can probably see why this knife appeals to me so much. This is one of my favorite knives. This is my Curtis F3, and you know, I love these big, heavy built titanium frame locks that still perform really well. And so, yeah, very close equivalents here. Obviously, this is in a very, very different price point, but I wanted to throw it in there just to show you that, you know, what all you're getting for your $220 here. And let's throw in one more higher end knife. This is, of course, the Steelcraft Bodega from this bag knife Steelcraft series, large titanium frame lock, once again right up my alley. And yeah, there's more going on here in terms of design and in terms of attention to detail. This is again is built by Realtor. But in terms of just the overall action, the satisfaction, the quality of the tool, this knife is right up there. So bring this down a little bit closer. And in conclusion, guys, if you haven't figured it out by now, I am a huge fan of this knife. It is really, really well done. The design is great. It's attractive. It's interesting. The materials are top-notch. Titanium and 20 CV steel. I suppose the sacrifice that you're making maybe would be the spring clip here, but I have no doubt that if you want an aftermarket clip, you could find tons of options to dress this up a little bit. In fact, I've seen, I think At Purvis Blades does Mokatai clips for these. Or Timascus, whichever one, I can't remember, maybe both. Anyway, but if you want to dress this up, if you want to upgrade it a little bit, there are lots of options out there, especially if you're on Instagram, you can see tons of those things out there. But yeah, handle's great, blade's great, action is great, steel is great. I mean, you know, what more could you really ask for in a knife? I think this is a great value. You're getting a truly high-end performance knife at $220, which is the budget end of ZTs, especially for their titanium knives. I know this guy is cheaper, but it's, you know, G10 and steel. But yeah, for their G10, for their titanium knives, $220 is the budget price, and for $220 to get 20 CV steel, I think this is an absolute buy for sure. If you're a ZT fan at all, and even if you're not a ZT fan, you just like nice knives, this is a great one. Highly, highly, highly recommended. I can't say enough about how impressed I am with this knife. There you go, guys. I love it when I get to a really positive review like that. It's just, you know, when I have all these complaints, it's sort of like a downer, but this is really exciting to just be happy and enjoy a great knife. So, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.